Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you are new, thank you so much for stopping by this video, and I hope you do subscribe on your way out. And for those who have been with me for a little bit, thank you so much for your support, and without further ado, we're going to jump right into the video. So as you guys can probably tell by the title, I'm going to be doing the final review on the Huda Beauty textured eyeshadow palette. Now, I recently did a first impressions video on this palette, and I kind of said at the end that I liked it based on the colors and everything, but there were some things that I didn't really like. So I'm just gonna come in and let you guys know exactly what I think about this palette. Alright, so first we're going to start off by talking about the packaging. So I am in Canada, and this palette retails for, I think it was $83 plus tax. So that is a very, very expensive palette. This is the most expensive palette that I have purchased, and to be honest, one thing that I didn't like about the packaging was just that it had this kind of cheap cardboard packaging. I mean, I do like the front casing of it, and you can see in all the shadows. The whole front part here kind of reminds me of what a Z palette would be like, but even a Z palette is a lot more heavy duty than this cardboard, and I just feel like for $93 I think they could have done a lot better with the packaging. And I'll probably say $93 or $83 interchangeably, because the base price was $83 for this palette, but by the time they taxed it here, it came up to $93. So please excuse me going forward. So now let's talk about the eyeshadows. The main selling point, I guess, of this palette was the textured shadows, and I believe that is a thing that everyone was kind of going nuts about, because it was supposed to give you like a super foiled, textured kind of look. And at first I didn't think much of it, but upon getting the palette and kind of trying it out, I have since decided that I do not like these shadows. Now, when you buy this palette, you will kind of notice that some of the shadows are a lot more textured than others. So for example, shades like 24K, Rose Gold, Trust Fun, and I think Fling is a little bit more foiled as well. And then you have some other shadows that I didn't find to be as textured. So shades like Blessed, Dubai, and Angelic. Some of these shadows you'll probably notice that I didn't even touch them, because I kind of just made up my mind and decided that I didn't like it after trying the shadows that I did try. But yeah, some of the shadows were a lot more textured. I feel like the Blessed shade, the Angelic shade, and the Dubai shade were more of like a satin kind of finish and went on really nicely. Now, these four textured shadows here, from what I understand, Huda did say that you have to apply these shadows with your finger. Now, first off, me hearing that, I wasn't super impressed, but I was willing to give it a try, just because this is like your palette if you love warm tones, and I'm a warm tone girl. I love warm tone shadows, so this was like me in a palette. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna give it a try. I also had a little bit of a theory in my mind, and I thought, you know, if I use a shorter bristled stiff brush, it would allow me to pick up the product on the brush. But honestly, if you watch my first impressions video, you'll find that it did not work. I did have a lot more luck in terms of trying to use a brush with this Dubai shade and the Blush shade. I did try, I believe, like all four of these other textured shadows with a brush, and there was literally no pickup on the brush. And I do understand that you're supposed to use your fingers, but to be honest, I just feel like for a $83 palette, it should be very versatile, and these foiled shadows really missed the mark for me. Now, I did try the palette the way it is recommended, and when I got it on my finger, it came out very nicely. But then when I tried to apply the product from my fingers onto my lids, I didn't really like how it looked, and it didn't seem to stick. So when the final look came out, what I had was like a patchy kind of mess, and a lot of my lid was coated really nicely and some parts were just not coated very nicely. So I don't know if that has something to do with me maybe having dry lids, but I don't think that I have dry lids, honestly. So I don't know. Other people have had really good luck with using the fingers with these eyeshadows, but for me it just didn't work. I also did not like the textured effect, and I do know that this is the selling point of the palette, a textured eyeshadow. When we're putting on our makeup or our eyeshadow, I'm sure our end goal is not to make our eyeshadow look crepey and just kind of not so much dry but more crepey, and the crepey effect is how I kind of describe the textured effect. A lot of it just kind of clumped up on one eye. Did manage to get a lot of the pigment off. I can't remember if it was the brush or the finger that I used at that point, but I managed to get it all off on one eye, and then on the other eye it didn't work so well. So what I ended up with was like that whole crepey effect, and it was like super intense on one eye, and I had to try to blend it out, and the other one just didn't match. And I mean, long story short, it just ended up being a mess for me, and I didn't like the effect. So in terms of the other shadows in this palette, you do get 10 matte shadows, and these are really nice shadows because they're all pretty much warm toned, and then you have some lighter colors here that you can kind of use on the brow bone. This one here is not a matte, it's more of a satin. Out of all the matte eyeshadows in here, I think I pretty much only tried from this dark brown here over to this lighter brown, and honestly I think these shadows are nice, but they're not like the best quality. When I dip my finger into these, I did feel like the shadows were really dry. They weren't buttery at all, and honestly some of them do take a lot to build up. I really felt like this palette just kind of missed the mark, especially with the textured shadows. Now, had the textured shadows been a little bit more smooth and easier to work with for myself, then I think that I would have been okay with the mattes and them not being super buttery and super intense. But because like half of this palette, or like, well, not half, I would say probably like a quarter of this palette I probably wouldn't like. I really cannot justify keeping this. The other thing about the textured shadows that I want to point out is just that I feel like they really remind me of the ColourPop shadows, not so much because of the formula, but more so just the application of them. The ColourPop shadows, if you know, and I'm sure most of you guys know, you do have to use your fingers. But the thing is, the difference between the ColourPop shadows and these shadows is a lot. So I'm more willing to do that and to kind of work with it if it was able to give me that full-on intense look and not missing parts of my eye. I would definitely try to work with this palette, but because I don't like the end result, and I also don't like how I actually have to apply these shadows, it just kind of makes the palette not worth it, and I can't justify keeping a palette that costs this much. So I'm pretty sure you guys know what I'm going to say. I do not like this palette and I will be taking it back. In fact, I'm heading to the mall right now. But yeah, definitely let me know your thoughts down below, because I feel like there's so many mixed reviews about these palettes. Some people really like them, and I also feel like the people who liked this palette a lot are people who tend to use their fingers with their shadows anyhow, and so they're not bothered by having to use their fingers to apply the foiled eyeshadows. And for me, someone who doesn't typically like that, I think that's where this palette kind of fell short for me. So that's pretty much all for the video, guys. Definitely let me know your thoughts on this palette if you have it, if you plan to get it, do you like it? You know, I feel like there's a lot of mixed reviews on this palette, but that's pretty much all I have to say about this palette. Thumbs up the video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe on your way out. And until my next video, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again. Bye.